What do you think is the difference between a person that says going to do something and a person that actually does it? Do you know what it is? The second person has a Stoic Drive. In this video we re-gone, look at how to use ancient philosophy to fuel modern motivation, so you can take action in your life and work towards your goals even when you do and feel like doing it. But a quick reminder before we get into it. This channel is all about helping you create a life that you re-excited about through ancient wisdom and practical advice. So if that sounds good to you, then hit that subscribe button. There was an article written a while ago that outlined the differences between people who said they were going to do something and those that actually did. And from this, 4 distinct differences emerged. The first 2 are obvious ones that most people know, but perhaps not enough people apply. People that achieve their goals, set goals, and make plans. While it might be tempting to dismiss these points as stating the obvious, think about how many people you know that have made New Year's resolutions or set out with a grand plan only to abandon them within a few weeks. We humans are great at planning for the future, but what we struggle with is taking action. The next 2 differences are less obvious, but equally important. People that achieve their goals? No. 3. Break down large tasks into smaller ones. And no. 4. Focus on getting started rather than finishing. These points might seem contradictory. If you want to achieve a goal, don't you need to finish things? Well, yes you do. But these 2 points aren't mutually exclusive, and instead complement each other perfectly. Let me explain. When faced with a large task, it's easy to become overwhelmed and do nothing. This is the reason why completing a large project requires a lot of self-discipline. But if you take some time to break it down into smaller, more manageable tasks, it becomes much easier. Instead of thinking I have to write a book, you say, I have to research chapter 1. Then once you've done that, you move on to, I have to write the introduction, and then I have to write section A of chapter 1. By breaking the large task into smaller ones, reduce the psychological pressure associated with it, and make it easier to start. This point, focusing on getting started rather than finishing, is where the rubber hits the road. In theory, we understand that by breaking down our larger goals into smaller steps, we make them more achievable. But in practice, we still tend to get stuck in analysis paralysis. We worry about whether we've broken it down enough. We obsess over making sure we have a perfect plan before we start. But the truth is that there is always going to be something that we haven't thought of or prepared for. There's always another thing that we could do to improve our chances of success. So at some point, we just have to get started. We and be paralyzed by the fear of failure or the desire to do everything we can to avoid it. Marcus Aurelius says in Meditations, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. We can use this quote in 2 ways. Firstly, we can reframe our thoughts. Rather than thinking I don't want to do this because it will hurt, we can say, I will do this because it hurts. Secondly, we can accept that obstacles are inevitable and that we shouldn't allow them to stop us from moving forward. When we realize that obstacles are simply part of the journey, we become less afraid of them and more willing to confront them head-on. Epictetus, a former slave-turned-philosopher, had this to say about obstacles. He said, it's not things that upset us. It's our opinions about those things. For instance, what's hard about being told to do something you don't want to do? Is it really hard, or is it just hard for you? Because you've decided that it's hard. You've decided that it's hard for you. The obstacle isn't in the thing itself, but in your opinions about the thing. Epicurus recognized that our ability to overcome obstacles is determined by our attitude towards them. If we choose to see them as opportunities for growth rather than as setbacks, then we'll be more likely to bounce back quickly from any challenges we face. There's an old saying that if you fail to prepare, you're preparing to fail. Let me offer a slight caveat to that saying. While preparation is important, it's also true that if you prepare too much, you'll end up wasting time and energy on things that may never happen. As Seneca said, all the time you spend wishing for something to happen is time you could have spent making it happen. We don't want to spend our lives wishing for things to be different or hoping that one day our dreams will come true. Instead, we want to be proactive and take steps towards creating the life we want. But how do we know when we've reached the right balance between preparation and action? How do we know when it's time to put our plans into motion? Well, there are no hard and fast rules, but we can use common sense and a little bit of self-awareness to guide us. One way to tell if you re-preparing too much is if you find yourself constantly putting off the actual work. If you're always coming up with new and inventive ways to avoid taking action, then it might be time to take a step back and evaluate your approach. Another sign that you're overthinking things is if you find yourself paralyzed by indecision. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself and wondering if you're making the right choices, then it might be time to take a leap of faith and trust in your ability to figure things out along the way. Ultimately, the best way to know if you're preparing enough is to ask yourself, am I taking action? If the answer is no, then it's probably time to take a cue from Seneca and start making things happen. One of the most difficult things about pursuing our goals is staying motivated when we do and feel like it. After all, motivation is like a muscle. It gets tired and worn out if it's not used regularly. This is where the idea of Stoic Drive comes in. The Stoics believed that we have a duty to ourselves and to the world to pursue our potential and live a virtuous life. They knew that sometimes we need to get up and take action even when we do and feel like it. But how do we do that? How do we find the strength to keep going when things get tough? Well, according to the Stoics, it all starts with our mindset. We have to remind ourselves that while we can't control our emotions, we can control how we react to them. We have to remember that fear and anxiety are normal and even necessary parts of the human experience. But just because something is normal doesn't mean we have to give in to it. We can choose to rise above our negative emotions and take action anyway. This is what the Stoics meant when they said, "The brave man is not fearless, but he is able to do what he must do even though he is afraid." When we understand that we can experience fear and anxiety and still take action, we become less afraid of our negative emotions and more willing to confront them head on. And it's in this confrontation that we find our Stoic drive. So the next time you're struggling to get motivated, remember the words of Marcus Aurelius. Act as if it's your last day on earth. Live a life that's true to your values and take action towards your goals every single day. And if you do that, you'll find that you have a Stoic drive that will help you succeed. That's all for today. If you like this video, then check out my video on the daily habits of the Roman emperors. And as always, remember to take care of yourself because you're worth it.